Hey everyone, Minutia Minute here, coming at you guys with another week of Batman reviews. This week, the bag is black because I ended up going to a different shop today so that I could secure my copy of Catwoman 41 from last week. After going through the shop's wall of last week's books, I went over to this week's books and picked up all four of the new Bat titles that came out this week, which included Detective Comics 1058, the conclusion of the Tower storyline, and the House of Gotham storyline that's been running for the last 3 months. Super excited about this issue. I grabbed Harley Quinn 13, which is launching a new storyline called The Verdict. Robin number 12, the final issue in this whole Lazarus Island storyline, teeing up the ball for Shadow War. And then finally, Bat cover of the week has to go to The Bat and the Furious, Task Force Z. Pretty excited to give this a read just based on the cover. So there is your list of reviews I'll be bringing to you guys today. I am going to dig into my Bat reading for the week and let you guys know what happened this week in Batman in just a moment. Okay, so I've had a chance to go through and read my books for the week. Unlike last week, it was actually really easy to put these in order from least favorite to most favorite, so that's how I will present them to you guys today. The one exception being Catwoman 41, since this is a book from last week, I have to say, it was worth waiting for the cover A because the amount of attitude on this cover is awesome. I'll just give you guys the TLDR. I liked this book quite a bit. We are now on the penultimate issue of this first 4-part story arc, and it's coming together nicely. I'm liking the art on this more and more. The art is by Nico Leon, but I do think a large part of it goes to the sort of neo-noir color scheme that the colors are bringing to this book. Really just makes the whole thing pop visually. Very different than Fernando Blanco's take on this title. A very effective style nonetheless. I think I'm really warming up to it, I have to admit. Looking at the story, the only thing I would really complain about is, we've got Catwoman bringing the fight to the crime families. Of course, you're going to have, good old Black Mask front and center, sort of pulling the strings. I just am really sick of Black Mask. I don't know why. It just seems like everywhere I turn, Black Mask is just like the default crime boss in any Batman story, whether it's on film in Birds of Prey or in something like this with Catwoman. There's an interesting subplot here going on between, a crime boss, his son, and his son's lover, and sort of the power dynamic going on in there that I thought made for some good sort of HBO drama. But overall, it's a decent first arc for the story. Being skeptical going into this new arc, I've largely been won over by it. It's been a lot of fun. I'm curious to see what happens, how Catwoman is able to bring justice to this murdered stripper, and hopefully it leads to, something great in a second arc. Right now it's, not quite seedy enough to be Frank Miller, and it's not quite posh enough to be like, Ocean's 11 or something. So that just leaves me with the 4 books that came out this week, and I know you guys are all wondering, is Detective Comics going to take the crown yet again? You're just going to have to wait and find out. Kicking things off at the bottom of the list, almost equally meme-worthy actually, Harley Quinn, always towards the bottom unfortunately. It was clearly my least favorite, but I actually had a fair amount of fun reading this. It gave me quite a few chuckles throughout. You guys already know my thoughts on the art style of this book, so I won't go into that. We'll just keep cruising along forward and talk about the storyline, which finds basically a Harley impersonator out in Gotham committing acts of vigilantism, mutilating and murdering various criminals throughout Gotham. You have this whole subplot with these 2 detectives that are trying to get to the bottom of what happened at the crime scene, and they see, video footage of what appears to be Harley Quinn that leads them to believe that Harley Quinn's the one doing the killing. Now, this is the screenshot they get. which is, clearly someone wearing a Harley Quinn costume and a Harley Quinn mask with the eye holes cut out. And somehow our crack squad on the GCPD go, yep, definitely Harley Quinn, and they go arrest her and throw her in jail. Even for a book that's lighthearted, like, I don't get why that. Like, they couldn't have done something a little less obvious? I don't know. We catch up with Harley and Kevin going back to her apartment. There's a nice little bit of denouement to Fear State when Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy split up, because we see Harley Quinn's apartment is in complete shambles, and Kevin feels really bad, because he hasn't realized how depressed Harley Quinn has been, which I thought was a nice element that can hopefully be developed as we continue on in the series. I think there's a great core concept for a Harley Quinn story here, which is Harley Quinn as psychiatrist, going back to the roots of who she was before Harley Quinn, but now doing it as Harley Quinn. Whenever this book shines, that's what they're really focused on. The problem is we keep getting all these other sorts of stories like, for example, Harley Quinn framed for murder. Stephanie Phillips is trying to figure out what to do with Harley Quinn when she's not a villain, is what it feels like. And it's really hard to do that. She runs the risk of turning her into another Robin. Because now Harley Quinn, lives by the rules of Batman, basically. Nobody wants that. And so she's got this great concept, but then she isn't really utilizing it. She's kind of falling into sort of tried and true formula stories of, villain turned good. What do we do with them? Well, the public still hates her, so throw her in jail. Like, that kind of stuff. I just think that you could probably do a lot more with this title than what we're seeing so far. All right, the next read I had was really solid, but it was beat out by the other two titles, so it ends up second from the bottom. It feels too low, but that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. That's going to go to Robin number 12. This was a fantastic read. We have a fill-in artist, Roger Cruz, on pencils, but he really fits the style of the book that we've seen up to this point, which was fantastic. We actually saw that in another title coming up as well. Editorial's been doing a better job the last month or two of, fitting the right artist on the right book, which is great. DC normally super sucks at that. At this point, the Lazarus storyline is over. We're gearing up for Shadow War. Robin steals this League of Assassins stealth blimp to go back to Gotham City. The thing is, though, this could easily have felt like a total filler issue, but it's really not. We get some great stuff with Robin and Talia and Ra's al Ghul. How does Robin fit into the Ra's al Ghul family? How is he a member of Bruce Wayne's family? And then at the bottom of it, his love of Alfred and wanting to bring him back. Last issue, he stole a Lazarus vial, and it was heavily implied he was going to use it to bring Alfred back. We got, in my opinion, a great resolution to that subplot that still kind of left some lingering questions if you were looking closely. And then we spend a decent amount of time with Robin, struggling with his inner demons, who Damian Wayne was in the past compared to who he is now, and how all those various things really fit together. One of the things I've loved about this Robin storyline wasn't just the Mortal Kombat element of it. It was really, the idea of letting Robin kind of go off on his own and grow up a little bit as a character. Josh Williamson really knows how to, dig deeper on the character and make him much more empathetic, much more evolved emotionally, and, a favorite Robin of mine, which wasn't always the case. When he came in and, supplanted Tim Drake, it was the hot new Robin, super exciting, but it didn't take that long to be like, gosh, Tim Drake really got the shaft. It's nice to see now, 15 years later, literally, Damian finally, earning that title. All right, penultimate read of the week goes to, drumroll, Detective Comics 1058. It was dethroned this week, not just to prevent Meme City from commencing, but genuinely the read that beat it fair and square, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. This was a fantastic conclusion to the Tower storyline. We immediately jump forward into the aftermath, which was interesting. I was expecting a little bit more at the tail end of the siege of the tower. Now, at the end of last issue, the big revelation was Mayor Nakano's wife was wearing Psycho Pirate's mask, implying that she could potentially become a future Psycho Pirate. And I don't know that we got a satisfying resolution to that here, but they do a good job settling the various scores that have been built up over the prior 11 issues. We get to really focus in on the supporting Bat characters doing this mop-up work, which was good. It felt like they didn't get shortchanged, which I was worried about. There's a great moment in here where Oswald Cobblepot is trying to kidnap the real Psycho Pirate, and it's just hulking Batman in disguise, which I thought was genuinely comical and ridiculous, especially when you look at what he looks like in disguise. Clearly not Batman. We get the funeral of Dr. Ware, somewhat bittersweet, I think, now that everyone knows that he was a con man. And most importantly, we get the installation of Chase Meridian as the head honcho at Arkham Tower moving forward. And Mayor Nakano vows to keep Arkham Tower in play. It is now a permanent fixture of Gotham City. We've got a new mayor, a new Arkham, a new head doctor at Arkham, and a new police commissioner. So this really is an evolved Gotham City. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes for them to revert back, because we've been here before. 20 years ago, Jim Gordon was shot in the street and was no longer police commissioner. But of course, it only took a couple years for him to show right back up and, keep doing his thing. This final issue brings Deb Donovan back into the fold, which is great. I would actually read a Mariko Tamaki book that was just about Deb Donovan. She seems to steal the show no matter what title she's in. She was in The Road to Task Force Z, which was in the backup, maybe of Detective, before House of Gotham started. And that got me super stoked for Task Force Z, which is a title I probably wouldn't have really thought that hard about, if not for Deb Donovan's gumshoe reporting in that Road to story. And then she's also been heavily featured in the Huntress arc in Detective Comics as well before that, and she stole the show in that. She brings us home in the Tower story, and I just love the sort of Neo Dashiell Hammett element of that character, and would really like to see them explore it a little bit more. Of course, we can't wrap things up without talking about House of Gotham. Oh boy, this was an emotional ride for me. I was really curious to see where this kid was going to end up. He lays a trap for Batman, which ultimately brings him back to the burnt remains of the Martha Wayne Foundation. He is tied up across from the Joker, and the Orphan basically, has it out between the two of them and what both of them have done to Gotham City, why Batman has not given him hope over the years. Batman pleads his own case, and then ultimately the Orphan has to make a decision about whether, he's going to be a figure of vengeance or a figure of forgiveness. At the end of last issue, I actually thought Batman was headed towards like an underground homeless society that the Orphan was going to be the head of, that was like sort of a thriving subculture of some kind, like something that Batman was going to think was nefarious, but then discover that, this kid had made a significant change in people's lives. I was definitely wrong. We do get, this Orphan as the head of a group of other younger orphans that he's taken in, these other forgotten figures of Gotham. It's just that his, motives didn't really evolve in the era after No Man's Land, which I thought maybe it was going to. It was still a satisfying conclusion for the character. The problem is we get a postscript with the Orphan and the Penguin, and the sins of this kid as a child are revisited upon him at the end of the story. And I don't want to say what happens at the very end, but it was a drag, to be honest. I was sad to see how this all kind of turned out. I was really invested in this Orphan week to week. It was really probably the highlight even over this Tower storyline. Maybe an okay ending, maybe not. I'm honestly torn about how Matt Rosenberg wrapped this title up. But that said, it was still a hell of a ride and well worth your time. I hope they collect it on its own so you can just read that whole arc. Not sure how it'll hold up in a collection because it was so episodic, but want to see it nonetheless. The title that was my book of the week this week, it's Task Force Z, the Bat and the Furious issue. I absolutely love this read. This was the other fill-in artist, by the way. Art in this is by Jack Herbert, as opposed to Eddie Barrows. But the art inside is on point, in my opinion. Like, you know, it's not quite as good as Eddie Barrows, but it fits the tone. Like, if I'm reading this in a collected edition, it's not going to take me right out of the story by any means. But that said, that wasn't what really brought this title over the edge for me. This just had a ton of juicy tidbits in it. We get sort of a secret origin of Task Force Z that's intercut with the goings-on that we left off with in issue 5. The way those two stories interconnected together, I thought was really effective, made for a really satisfying story, and answered a lot of questions for me. And I'll be honest, like, it's going to be hard to talk about this without spoiling, so maybe if you're going to read this, see you later. Come back after you've read it. Among my favorite parts of this book, we get to learn about the origin of the Lazarus Serum. And while he may have been featured in a flashback before and I didn't catch it, we get a fair amount of entertainment value from Resurrection Man in this, who is a character that DC doesn't do a whole lot with, and it was very appropriate to have him in this title specifically. And there's a fantastic moment that had me laugh out loud where they have this huge mishap and everything blows up, and Dr. Albrecht is lamenting the fact that they're running out of resources to develop this. And they're like, at least we still have Resurrection Man, who died in the explosion. And then he wakes up and is like, oh, by the way, I quit. Which was really funny. There's a great payoff to the entrance of KG Beast, who had them on the ropes last issue. KG Beast detonates a bomb, and Mr. Freeze hops in and creates an ice wall to protect everyone in tandem with Jason Todd, which was a cool team-up moment. What else? Oh, another thing that kind of put me off, I want to say it was like, I don't remember if it was like issue 3, but we found out that Red Hood was actually working for Batman the whole time, which felt like a repeat plot point from Future State Gotham, from the arc that just wrapped up. And in this, we see that Jason Todd actually is truly invested in this team. And I've been saying I want this to be a book about Task Force Z, not about, you know, people trying to take apart Task Force Z. So in issue 6, we get this great moment where, you know, Batman is trying to pull the plug on all of this, and Jason Todd sides with Task Force Z and stands up for them. And there's this great moment where Jason Todd jumps on the Batmobile that's pursuing him and tells Batman to pull over, and Batman abruptly hits the brakes and sends Jason Todd flying, which was a wonderful little comedic moment that undercut some of the, you know, grim, dark conflict that always kind of shows up between Red Hood and Batman in these stories. Last thing I want to call out in this, which doesn't necessarily answer a question, but makes me feel better about the fact that it hasn't been answered yet, is what is up with Bane right now? Because we found out a couple issues ago in The Joker that Bane is still alive and was likely behind everything that happened with A-Day. So he was never dead. And yet here he is on the cover of this as, you know, Zombie Bane. This book does nothing to rectify that contradiction. However, when Jason Todd shows up in Amanda Waller's penthouse looking for some answers, he sees a bunch of evidence posted on the wall with, you know, the typical red lines on the city and all that kind of a stuff, and then a whole bunch of characters that we know from this book. And if you look really closely, right in the corner, you've got this Zombie Bane right here, but it doesn't say that it's Bane underneath it. It says, who is this? And I can't wait to find out. So in case you can't tell, I had an amazing time reading Task Force Z. This book has just been fun. It just doesn't fit into the traditional Batman mold. It doesn't fit into the DC zombie mold. It doesn't fit into the Suicide Squad mode. And it just seems like a superfluous story that's just a fun concept. And Matthew Rosenberg writing it makes all the difference because he knows how to take the piss out of Jason Todd. It's so easy for Jason Todd to be grim, dark, brooding, you know, I was the wronged Robin, so to speak, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. The conflict between Batman and Red Hood is so played out. But right when you think they're going to fall into some of those traps, Matthew Rosenberg brings it back. My only complaint about this book so far has been, you know, I just want to see Task Force Z go out and do a mission. It's always about the origin of Task Force Z. But now that we've gotten to issue 6, the answers to where Task Force Z came from and all that kind of stuff has been satisfactorily answered in a way that I'm actually really glad that I stuck with this. And so I'm uber curious to see what happens when they take on Amanda Waller as we develop in issue 7 onward. So if you weren't picking it up, I would assume there's a trade coming for this soon. Check out Task Force Z. It's got amazing art, if nothing else, and it's just a fun ride. So go check it out. Definitely book of the week. This one's actually could be a contender for book of the month, to be honest with you guys. So that wraps up my thoughts on what happened this week in Batman. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I hope you guys have a great week in comics, and thanks for watching.